The night that would quietly change Daniel Carter's life began with a feeling he could not explain. As he stood outside the tall glass building on Wall Street, he adjusted the sleeves of his simple navy suit and looked up at the shining floors above him. Light spilled from the large windows and faint music drifted through the entrance doors. People in expensive clothes walked inside laughing, holding phones and car keys that probably cost more than Daniel's monthly salary. For a moment, he wondered if he truly belonged there. Then he reminded himself why he had come. His wife, Olivia Carter, worked inside that building, and tonight her company was celebrating another successful year. She had asked him to attend the party. Daniel took a slow breath, straightened his shoulders, and walked in. The lobby was wide and bright. Marble floors reflected golden lights from a massive chandelier above. A long table displayed glasses filled with sparkling drinks, and waiters in black suits moved smoothly through the crowd. The air smelled faintly of perfume and expensive cologne. Daniel felt out of place almost immediately. Around him were men talking about markets, investments, and billion-dollar deals. Women wore elegant dresses and heels that clicked confidently against the floor. Everyone seemed to move with a calm confidence that came from living in a world of money and power. Daniel, however, came from a very different world. He was a high school history teacher in Brooklyn. His days were filled with chalkboards, textbooks, and teenagers who sometimes struggled to believe in themselves. He didn't earn much money, but he loved teaching. Helping students understand the past and believe in their future gave him purpose. Still, compared to the polished people around him, he felt simple. He looked around the crowded room until he spotted Olivia near the far side of the hall. She stood with a group of coworkers holding a glass of champagne. Even from a distance, she looked confident and graceful. Her deep red dress matched the warm lights around her, and her long dark hair fell neatly over her shoulders. When she laughed, the people around her leaned closer as if her energy pulled them in. Daniel smiled. Seeing her like that filled him with pride. Olivia had worked incredibly hard to reach her position at the firm. When they first met years ago, she had been a young analyst with big dreams. Daniel remembered the nights she stayed awake studying reports while he graded student essays beside her. They had supported each other through those early years, believing they were building a life together. Daniel walked toward her, weaving through the crowd. As he approached, Olivia turned and noticed him. Her smile appeared quickly, but Daniel sensed a brief flicker of surprise in her eyes. "Daniel, you made it," she said, stepping forward. He nodded and kissed her cheek. "Of course. I wouldn't miss it." For a moment, they stood close together. But before Daniel could say more, Olivia turned back toward the group she had been speaking with. "Everyone, this is my husband," she said. The people around them nodded politely. Daniel shook a few hands and introduced himself. Most of them were polite but distracted, clearly more interested in the conversations about stocks and investments. Then one man stepped forward from the group with a confident smile. He was tall, probably in his late 50s, with silver hair and sharp blue eyes. His dark suit fit perfectly and his watch gleamed under the lights. "So this is the famous husband," he said smoothly. Olivia shifted slightly beside Daniel. "Daniel, this is Victor Langford." Daniel immediately recognized the name. Victor was Olivia's boss, the powerful executive who had built the firm into one of the most successful companies on Wall Street. Daniel extended his hand politely. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Langford." Victor shook it, though his grip felt more like a quick test than a friendly greeting. "I've heard a lot about you," Victor said. Daniel raised an eyebrow slightly. "Hopefully, good things." Victor's smile widened, but it held a hint of amusement. "Well, Olivia tells me you're a teacher." "Yes," Daniel replied calmly. Victor lifted his champagne glass and took a small sip before speaking again. "A teacher," he repeated slowly. As if tasting the word, several people around them exchanged quiet glances. Victor chuckled softly. "Interesting." Daniel remained calm. Though he could feel the attention of the group shifting toward him, Victor leaned back slightly, studying him. "Olivia is one of the brightest people in this company. Brilliant with numbers, fast decisions, strong instincts. Frankly, she's going places." Daniel nodded. I know. I'm very proud of her. Victor smiled again, though something about it felt slightly sharp. I imagine you are. It must be exciting watching your wife succeed in such a competitive field. It is, Daniel replied. Victor tilted his head. Tell me something, Daniel. Do you ever feel out of place in a room like this? The question was asked lightly, but the room grew quiet. Daniel glanced around the crowd for a moment. The polished suits, the confident investors, the powerful executives. Then he looked back at Victor. I'm comfortable wherever my wife is, he said simply. Victor laughed. Very diplomatic answer. A few people chuckled. Victor took another sip of his drink and continued. But honestly, the financial world is very different from education. The stakes are bigger, the pressure is higher, and the rewards, well, they're quite impressive. Daniel remained calm. Every field has its own challenges. Victor nodded slowly. But surely teaching doesn't pay like this world does, he said. No million-dollar bonuses or luxury apartments. More laughter came from the group. Daniel noticed Olivia looking slightly uncomfortable, though she said nothing. Victor leaned closer. I mean, Olivia's career must bring home most of the income, right? Daniel felt the eyes of everyone in the circle settle on him. But instead of reacting with anger, he smiled politely. Yes, he said honestly. Olivia earns more than I do. Victor lifted his eyebrows as if impressed. Well, that's refreshing honesty, then he added with a grin. Must be nice having a wife who supports the household. The group laughed again. Daniel felt the heat rising in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. He had dealt with difficult students, angry parents, and stressful school boards before. One arrogant businessman would not break his composure. Victor continued, clearly enjoying the attention. Tell me, Daniel, do you ever feel intimidated by Olivia's success? Daniel paused before answering. No, he said. Victor tilted his head curiously. No? Daniel shook his head because success means different things to different people. The group quieted slightly. Daniel continued calmly. I teach teenagers who often believe they won't amount to anything. When one of them graduates, finds confidence, and starts building a future, that feels like success to me. A few people nodded thoughtfully, but Victor simply smiled again. Well, that's certainly a noble way to look at it. His tone made it clear he wasn't fully convinced. The conversation shifted after that, moving back to market predictions and investment strategies. Daniel listened politely but spoke very little. The topics felt distant from his everyday life. After some time, Olivia excused herself to speak with another executive. Daniel watched her walk away. Noticing how easily she moved through the crowd, greeting people, laughing, discussing projects, she looked like she truly belonged in this world as the party continued. Daniel wandered toward a quieter corner of the room. He picked up a glass of water from a passing tray and stepped toward a large balcony. Overlooking the city, the night air outside felt cooler and calmer. New York stretched below him like a sea of lights. Cars moved slowly along distant streets, and tall buildings stood like glowing towers in the dark. Daniel rested his hands on the balcony railing and took a deep breath. The noise of the party softened behind him. For the first time that evening, he allowed himself to think honestly about what he had felt inside. Victor's words hadn't just been jokes. They had revealed something deeper about how people in this world viewed him to them. He wasn't impressive. He wasn't powerful. He wasn't wealthy. He was simply the husband of someone. Important. Daniel looked down at the city streets far below. Part of him wondered if Olivia ever felt the same way. The thought made his chest tighten. They had once dreamed about building a simple life together, a warm home, meaningful work, and mutual respect. But Olivia's world had changed, and maybe she had changed with it. Daniel stood there quietly, watching the lights flicker across the city behind him. The balcony door opened softly. Voices drifted. Outside, one of them was Olivia's, and the other voice belonged to Victor. Langford. Daniel didn't turn around. Immediately, he had no idea that the conversation he was about to overhear would shake the foundation of his marriage. But in that moment, standing alone under the night sky, he felt a strange feeling in his chest, as if something important was about to break. The night air on the balcony was cooler than Daniel expected. He had stepped outside for a moment of peace, needing space from the crowd inside the luxurious Wall Street party. The music and laughter from the party felt distant now, muffled by the heavy glass doors behind him. Daniel had hoped to catch a quiet moment with his thoughts, to reflect on the strange mix of pride and discomfort he had felt while talking with Victor Langford earlier. Yet, as he leaned lightly on the railing, the voices that reached his ears made him freeze. They were soft, almost secretive, but unmistakable. Olivia's voice, and Victor's Daniel's first instinct was to step back, to ignore what was being said. But the words floated clearly in the night air, carrying a weight he hadn't anticipated. "You didn't have to embarrass him like that," Olivia said, her tone gentle but firm. The use of the word embarrass made Daniel's stomach twist. He had been trying to remain calm, composed, and dignified. Yet here, outside in the shadows, he realized that Victor's laughter and the subtle digs had wounded more than he cared to admit. Victor's voice, smooth and almost teasing, responded, "Oh, come on." It was harmless, he said, and Daniel could almost hear the smirk behind the words. Daniel's heart beat faster. Harmless, he thought. A room full of people laughing quietly at him, watching him, and his wife calling it harmless. The chill in the night did nothing to cool the burning knot in his chest. Olivia's voice came again. "You know, he's not used to this world," she said, almost pleading, almost defending. Daniel's mind raced. Was she trying to excuse the way Victor had treated him? Was this an attempt to soften the humiliation in front of everyone at the party? He felt a cold edge of disappointment and hurt. For a brief moment, he had hoped Olivia would speak for him, would stand by him, would say that his work mattered, that he mattered. But her words seemed to lean toward Victor, not toward him. Victor laughed again, a sound that grated against Daniel's nerves. "Exactly my point," he said. Daniel felt a flash of anger, but more than that, a heavy ache of confusion. His wife, the woman he loved, was standing there in the night, and her words seemed to blur lines between loyalty, admiration, and perhaps even fascination with Victor. The conversation paused for a moment, and then Victor's tone shifted slightly, almost gentle, though Daniel didn't like the direction it was heading. "You deserve someone who understands your ambition, Olivia," he said. "Someone who moves in the same circles." Daniel's hands clenched slightly. He didn't want to hear any more. He hadn't expected jealousy nor confrontation, but a quiet sting settled in his chest. He had always known Olivia was ambitious, driven, and brilliant. But hearing Victor articulate a vision that seemed to place him outside it made something inside him ache. Olivia's next words were soft, uncertain, carrying a weight that made Daniel's chest tighten further. "Things aren't that simple," she said. The tone, the hesitation, and the pause afterward suggested that she was struggling with her own feelings, torn between two worlds. Daniel stepped back slightly, needing the air more than ever. The night suddenly feeling smaller, confined, suffocating even. Victor's voice lowered, almost a whisper in the cool night, but Daniel could hear every word. "They could be," he said. That single sentence, calm yet insistent, struck Daniel in a way nothing else had. The idea that Olivia might leave the life they had built together, or at least consider it, felt surreal. He felt a strange mix of heartbreak and disbelief. He had supported her dreams, celebrated her victories, and yet here he was, realizing that the distance between them had grown into a silent, almost invisible chasm. Daniel didn't hear everything that came next. He didn't want to. He realized he was holding his breath, standing still on the balcony as the wind whispered against his face. The space between him and the door suddenly felt oppressive, a reminder that he no longer felt at home in this world. Not fully in Olivia's world, and perhaps not even in his own relationship anymore. The balcony, once a place for a quiet breath, now felt like a threshold into uncertainty, unable to bear more. Daniel stepped inside, blending back into the crowd without saying a word. The music and laughter seemed louder now, almost mocking him. And the glasses of champagne, the designer suits, and elegant dresses felt alien. He moved slowly, carefully, toward the exit. He could no longer watch Olivia navigate the space without feeling the painful contrast between them. Olivia noticed him leaving. Her eyes met his briefly, a mixture of surprise and concern, but Daniel didn't stop. He nodded once, simply, and continued out the door. The taxi ride home was quiet, almost painfully so. Streetlights passed by in a steady blur, and Daniel stared out the window, lost in thoughts he had avoided for months. Memories of the early years of their marriage drifted to the surface, the tiny apartment they shared, the long nights of conversations about dreams, hopes, and future plans. Back then, everything had seemed possible, built together with love, trust, and shared ambition now. After years of growth, promotions, and a widening social circle for Olivia, Daniel realized how much they had changed. He had ignored the quiet signs of distance, the subtle shifts in priorities, the emotional gaps that had crept between them. He had assumed their bond was unshakable, that love alone would protect them from the changes success brought. But tonight, Victor's words and Olivia's responses had laid bare what he had failed to acknowledge. Their lives were no longer aligned in the same rhythm. When he reached their apartment, the silence felt louder than any words could have. He didn't hear Olivia enter, and he didn't want to. He sank onto the couch, the dim glow of the streetlights outside the windows casting shadows across the room. He thought of Victor's confident stride, his sharp words, and his subtle dominance in every interaction. He thought of the way Olivia had hesitated when Victor spoke, how her tone carried the weight of indecision and perhaps longing for recognition in a world Daniel could not give her. Hours passed. The apartment remained still. Daniel's mind replayed the evening, analyzing every glance, every word, every subtle interaction. He realized that the party had not only been about celebrating success. It had been a mirror reflecting the differences in their worlds and the quiet imbalance that had grown between them. His respect for Olivia's ambition had not diminished, but the realization that he was no longer an equal participant in her world brought a pang of sorrow he could not easily shake. Finally, front door opened. Olivia stepped inside, quiet, tired, but still carrying the elegance and poise she had at the party. Her eyes found Daniel's, and he saw surprise there. "You left early," she said softly, a question disguised as observation. Daniel nodded, choosing his words carefully. "I wasn't feeling well," he said, the simplicity of the statement hiding the depth of his emotions. Olivia placed her purse on the table, a silent pause stretching between them. Daniel looked at her gently. "Olivia, are you happy?" he asked, his voice soft but direct. Her reaction was subtle but telling. She looked away, a sigh escaping her lips. "Things have just been complicated," she admitted. The words, though few, carried a weight that pressed on Daniel's heart. He realized that what she did not say was as important as the words she had spoken. "Complicated how?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady, to keep himself composed in the midst of emotional turbulence. Olivia hesitated, then said quietly, "Victor has been helping my career a lot lately." Daniel felt a chill spread through him. The realization sank slowly, a heavy weight pressing on his chest. The quiet implication behind her words spoke volumes. His mind raced, trying to process the betrayal, the shifting dynamics, and the quiet distance that had grown between them over the months. "I see," he said softly, though the words felt inadequate. He felt a rush of emotions, anger, disappointment, heartbreak, and a strange sense of release. He had always trusted Olivia, supported her ambitions, celebrated her victories. And yet here he was, realizing that her world had grown in ways that excluded him. For a moment, he considered confrontation, shouting, demanding answers, making her explain herself fully. But instead, something unexpected happened. He felt tired not just physically, but emotionally, as if the events of the evening had drained all the energy he had left to argue or fight. "Daniel," Olivia began, her voice gentle, Carrying a mixture of concern and hesitation, he shook his head softly, a small, weary gesture that spoke more than words could. "Not tonight," he said. He walked to the bedroom, closing the door quietly behind him. The quiet click of the lock was a small boundary, a protective measure for the emotional turmoil he was experiencing outside. Olivia remained in the hallway, unsure, silent, the weight of the night pressing on her as well. Both of them felt the distance, the uncertainty, and the tension that had grown like an invisible wall between them. Neither slept much that night, each lost in thoughts about the party, the conversations, and the fragile state of their relationship. Daniel lay awake, replaying every word, every glance, and every subtle gesture. For the first time, he asked himself difficult questions he had avoided for years. Was Olivia still happy with him? Did their marriage still hold the same meaning for her as it did for him? The answers were not clear, and that uncertainty brought a pain he could not ignore. The morning sunlight spilled gently into Daniel's apartment. But the quiet between him and Olivia was heavy, almost tangible. He had stayed awake long after she had gone to bed, replaying every detail of the previous night in his mind. The laughter, the whispers on the balcony, the subtle digs from Victor Langford, all of it weighed on him like a stone in his chest. Olivia moved about the apartment silently, careful not to disturb him. Daniel noticed her fatigue, the subtle slump of her shoulders, the way her eyes flicked toward him occasionally, searching for something she wasn't ready to name. Neither of them spoke much over breakfast. The silence was not comfortable, it was charged, electric, and full of unspoken truths. Daniel left for work earlier than usual, carrying his bag full of lesson plans, notebooks, and grading papers. Teaching had always been a place of clarity for him, a space where logic and knowledge could balance out the chaos of life. But that day, even his classroom felt different. As he walked past the familiar walls adorned with history posters and timelines, he realized that nothing could feel normal after the night he had endured. His students arrived one by one, chatting about school events, sports, and homework, blissfully unaware of the emotional turmoil their teacher carried. Daniel greeted them with a small smile, but inside, his mind was restless. During the morning lessons, he found it difficult to focus. His eyes wandered toward the window, looking out at the city beyond, thinking about Olivia and Victor, the party, and the conversation on the balcony. He tried to remind himself that his love for Olivia had always been unconditional. He had supported her ambitions, celebrated her victories, and been proud of her achievements. Yet the thought that she might no longer see him as an equal in her life hurt more than he expected. He realized that the distance between them had been growing quietly over the years, masked by routines and polite smiles, but tonight it had become undeniable. When the last students left the classroom, Daniel stayed behind, organizing papers and stacking notebooks neatly on the shelves. The silence of the empty classroom provided a moment to think, a small pocket of peace in which he could process his emotions. Just as he was finishing, his colleague, Emma Brooks, walked in carrying a stack of literature books. Emma had been teaching at the school for years and was known for her warm, understanding nature. She had noticed Daniel's distracted demeanor for a few days now and approached with her usual calm presence. "Rough night?" Emma asked gently, perching on the edge of a desk. Daniel glanced at her, surprised but grateful for the interruption. He offered a faint smile. "You could say that," he admitted. Emma listened quietly as Daniel explained in measured words. The events of the previous night, the party, Victor's taunts, Olivia's ambiguous reactions, and the uncomfortable tension he had felt. She did not interrupt, nor did she offer immediate advice. She simply listened, the way someone does when they truly want to understand. After a pause, she said softly, "People sometimes confuse money with worth." Daniel looked at her, absorbing the simplicity of her words. Emma continued, "They think wealth and power measure a person's value. But what you do every day helping students grow, guiding them through challenges, that is worth more than any bonus or promotion." Daniel felt warmth rise in his chest, a small comfort in the storm of doubt and hurt he had felt the night before. Her words reminded him that success and respect were not always measured by status or wealth. They were measured by impact, by the lives you touched and the integrity you carried. Later that evening, as Daniel prepared to leave, something unexpected happened. A sleek black car pulled up outside the modest school building, its polished frame reflecting the fading sunlight. A man stepped out with confident, purposeful strides. It was Victor Langford. The presence of the Wall Street titan outside a high school seemed almost absurd. Teachers and students glanced curiously as he approached the building with his usual commanding presence, each step echoing authority. He did not hesitate. He had a mission. Victor made his way to Daniel's classroom with a precision that betrayed experience. He opened the door without knocking and looked around at the familiar posters and student projects displayed across the walls. The simplicity of the classroom was a stark contrast to the glitzy offices and boardrooms he was accustomed to. Daniel's initial surprise at Victor's arrival gave way to quiet curiosity. "Mr. Langford," he said calmly. Standing up, Victor offered a polite smile. "Mr. Carter," he replied. There was a pause as his eyes took in the classroom, the neatly stacked papers, the educational charts, and the personal touches that made it feel alive. It was a simple space, but it radiated life, energy, and purpose qualities that no amount of money could buy. Victor folded his arms and spoke in a measured tone. "I came to talk." Daniel listened, unsure of what to expect. Victor's presence was intimidating, yet he felt a strange sense of anticipation. Victor's voice was steady, not confrontational, but carrying weight. "Olivia told me about your conversation last night," Victor began. Daniel did not react outwardly, simply maintaining a calm, steady expression. Victor studied him carefully. "You're different from most people I deal with," he admitted. Daniel raised an eyebrow slightly. "How so?" he asked, his voice steady but curious. Victor's gaze softened slightly, a rare vulnerability flickering across his expression. "You didn't fight. You didn't argue. Most people would have reacted with anger or defensiveness, especially when being challenged or embarrassed in front of others." Daniel leaned against the edge of a desk, absorbing the unusual admission. "Some things aren't worth fighting over," Daniel said calmly, his words deliberate and measured. Victor nodded, seemingly approving. He continued, "I spend my life surrounded by people chasing power, money, and status. I assumed everyone measured success the same way. But now, after seeing how you handled yourself, I realize influence and strength can take many forms." Daniel observed the Wall Street titans studying the students' projects, noting the passion and creativity they represented. In that moment, Daniel understood that Victor's perception of success was shifting, shaped by the quiet integrity he carried in his everyday life. Victor extended a hand toward Daniel, this time in genuine respect. "For what it's worth, Olivia has some decisions to make," he said. Daniel nodded slowly. "I think we both do," he replied. The exchange, though brief, carried an unspoken acknowledgement of boundaries, respect, and clarity. Victor had come expecting confrontation or a lesson in dominance. But he had encountered something else entirely: integrity, calm strength, and quiet confidence. After Victor left, Daniel's colleague Emma returned to the classroom, curious. "Was that the famous Wall Street boss?" she asked, her tone a mixture of disbelief and amusement. Daniel chuckled softly, shaking his head. "Apparently," he said. Emma smiled knowingly. "Did he apologize?" Daniel gave a small laugh. "Something like that?" They shared a brief, comfortable silence, observing the empty classroom. For the first time since the party, Daniel felt peace settling over him. He realized that life was not defined by wealth, status, or the opinions of others. True respect and strength came from character, integrity, and the quiet courage to maintain one's values even in challenging circumstances. As Daniel packed his bag to leave, he thought about Olivia and the state of their marriage. Their relationship had been tested, shaken by ambition, distance, and choices made over time. Yet he felt clarity that had eluded him for weeks. The party, Victor's words, and the late-night balcony conversation had all revealed truths that could not be ignored. Life had shifted, and so had their paths. Whether those paths converged or diverged remained unknown. Walking out of the school into the cool evening air, Daniel felt a sense of readiness. He did not know exactly what the future would bring, or whether his marriage could survive the emotional distance and unspoken doubts. But he knew that he had faced the test of character, integrity, and self-worth. The respect he had earned, the strength he had shown, and the clarity he had gained would guide him. No matter what happened next, the city stretched before him, alive and glittering, full of unknown possibilities. Daniel walked with measured steps, each one carrying a quiet confidence born from understanding who he was and what he valued. He knew that challenges would come, that difficult conversations with Olivia were inevitable, and that the emotional landscape of their marriage might change forever. Yet for the first time in a long while, he felt prepared to face it all. Daniel understood that some lessons are learned not in quiet moments or small victories, but in moments of vulnerability, confrontation, and unexpected acknowledgement from those who seem untouchable. Victor Langford, the man who had once made him feel small and insignificant, had inadvertently become a catalyst for Daniel's self-realization. The respect Victor had shown, however reluctant, was a mirror reflecting Daniel's own strength and integrity. Even as the night deepened and the city lights shimmered against the dark sky, Daniel felt a sense of calm determination. He did not know if Olivia's heart was still aligned with his, nor did he know what choices she would make. But he knew that he had stood firm in his principles, maintained his dignity, and embraced his own version of success.